In 2015, 6 men enters an underground cave system, but they didn't know that a disaster was waiting to happen. Out of the 6 men, only 4 come out. What happened to the other 2? Well, this is their story. When Jason went to sleep that night, it was raining. It was raining heavily. His wife Caroline told him, "Please, you have to be more careful." Jason replied to her, "Always," implying that she doesn't have to worry at all. She was worried about the caving trip Jason had planned to go on the next morning. Jason, being a novice caver, wanted to attempt to explore an underground cave system with his friends. So far, he had gone caving only 4 times, but he knows this one is going to be the toughest one. The cave is called Cascade, a remote cave system on Vancouver Island. It is so dangerous that the cave mouth is blocked by a locked metal door to keep novice cavers like Jason out. However, you could get the key to unlock it, but you and your caving party must sign a waiver first. Cascade is about 338 feet deep and about a mile long, with full of turns and barely passable tight squeezes. If you are claustrophobic, it would be a literal nightmare to be inside this cave. Jason was 43 years old as of the time of this cave exploration. Although he was older, he was the least experienced caver among his caving group. Though unlike Jason, his friend Andrew, who was also going on this caving trip, is highly experienced in the sport. In fact, being a caving guide, he was the one to introduce Jason to caving. As a plus point, Andrew was also a paramedic, so if anything goes south and someone gets hurt inside the cave, Andrew would know what to do. So it was 6 a.m. on December 5th of 2015 when it all began. Along with Andrew and Jason, Adam, who's also a paramedic, and Zach, who's a firefighter, drove through heavy rain to the parking lot of a log cabin candy store in Port Alberni. There they were able to get the key after signing the waiver, and then also met up with Matt and Arthur. So now that all 6 friends were met up, they continued their journey to the location of Cascade Cave. They drove up an unmarked trail for almost a mile. On the way, they got the essentials they needed for the adventure, such as ropes, harnesses, carabiners, food, water, some small equipment to cook the food, a first aid kit, and also a Mylar space blanket that resembles aluminum foil. In order to reach the cave, they also had to hike a bit. So after a little while of hiking and walking and a little bit of climbing, they finally got to the cave's entrance. By this point, it was around 10 a.m. With the key they were given, they unlocked the door and pulled it open. Then they had to climb 30 feet down a rickety aluminum ladder into the underground darkness. Everyone anchored with carabiners to a rope. The last one to enter the cave locked the door behind him and ties the key to the bottom of the ladder. Inside the cave, it was damp and cold, more precisely about 41 degrees. So they started walking down a narrow passage studded with jagged boulders. With the headlamps they were using, they were able to see despite the darkness. Inside, it was weirdly dead silent, but as they were going deeper into the cave for a couple minutes, they started hearing bubbles of water dripping from somewhere above. Then another minute passed. That dripping sound turned into a light but steady flow. So now they are wading in the water up to their ankles. Then it slowly rose to their shins. "Is everyone okay?" Andrew, as he was leading, asked everyone loudly. "Yeah," comes the reply. "Yup, me too." So this went on like that for some time. About 45 minutes went by. Adam had a problem. He said to the group that he can't walk anymore. His back had been injured a couple weeks ago and now it is stinging. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Caving would make it worse. Constant hunching over has done more damage to the injury. So as they learned about his condition, they knew the best course of action for Adam is to stop here and go back out to the surface. Thus Matt offered to escort him to the entrance. Once Adam was out of the cave, Matt again closed and locked the door. Then he quickly rejoins his remaining 4 friends who were waiting for him deep inside the cave. So for the next 1.5 hours, they kept descending deeper and deeper into the system. It took them longer as it wasn't just a straight line walk. They had to crawl, stride, and slide through the cave's 2 very distinctive environments. It was either terrifyingly narrow passages that are barely big enough to fit a grown man, or these dark and spacious chambers that are almost overwhelming to be in. They tried to stay within 100 feet from the last caver to the first, congregating in the chambers between the more challenging climbs and crawls. Jason, being new to such an environment, was amazed at everything he was seeing. Cascade was nothing like the last 4 caves he explored. This one looked unique and just breathtaking. However, soon he got to see what makes Cascade really unique. Just when he thought he had seen the smallest passages already, he came across one of the special features of Cascade Cave. A claustrophobically narrow passage that is not big enough to stand up in, that leads into a short, tight downhill. This passage has a name: Bastard Scroll. 4 different streams meet in this passage, so the flow of the water is much stronger and quicker. Crab walk, Andrew calls. So with difficulty, they made it through the Bastard Scroll and then got to the top of a waterfall called Double Trouble. The name makes sense as a jutting rock splits the stream in 2. So everyone set up their ropes to rappel 50 feet. This was one of the most challenging sections of the cave to navigate through. With the boots and gloved hands clawed for leverage on slippery ledges, the water gushes on either side of the rock formation, landing at the bottom in a spray of bubbles. There is a reason why they call this cave Cascade. So the group of friends started rappelling down. Unlike others, Jason found it more difficult and even scarier. His heart was racing fast. It felt like it was going to explode in his chest. He thought to himself, "You wanted this. You wanted a harder challenge, and now you got it." When couple more minutes passed beyond Double Trouble, the group stopped for a quick bite. By this point, it was almost 1 p.m. and so far they have been inside the cave for 3 hours in total. Andrew cooked some beef and chicken stew with rice with the jet boil they had brought with them. There they spent about 20 minutes having their lunch before they began continuing sliding and crawling their way down into the cave towards the end. By now they have a little less than half a mile left to successfully get to the cave's end. However, the group couldn't even go 300 feet. Zach began shivering violently. Despite the temperature not changing at all since the time they entered the cave, the cold inside the cave as they went deeper started to take a greater toll on everyone. But Zach had it the worst, so the 5 friends had to make a decision. They had to decide whether they continue down the same route and suffer even colder weather, or just turn back and go back the same way they came to the cave entrance. Both sounded deadly, but they eventually decided to turn back and head toward the entrance. So they began retracing their route. First Matt goes, then Arthur, then Jason, Zach, and finally Andrew. They kinda had to speed up. The cold turned into bone-chilling and was slowly getting worse by every minute. The sound of rushing water also only grew louder. On the route there was more mud and water than there was on the way down a couple hours earlier. As the ground with mud was super sticky, they had such a difficult time walking and crawling. Especially considering the fact that they are now climbing up, it was only getting harder and longer to return than it did to come down. "Careful," one of the cavers up front yells to those behind. As of this point, it was nearing 2:30 p.m. and they barely made it to Double Trouble. The sound of rushing water now has turned into an overwhelming roar. What before had been a gushing but manageable flow is now a churning, angry white froth. How is this even possible? Jason thought to himself, completely dumbfounded by what he was seeing and hearing. It is probably the rainwater, and this might even be a sign of a flash flood. Nonetheless, he realized that they have to get past all these troubles as soon as possible. So Matt first hooked the rope that was remained attached at the top of Double Trouble to his harness. It was just 50 feet, but it was not easy at all. It was exhausting to hoist one leg to find a small wet slippery shelf in the rock wall, then a gloved hand, then the other leg. The second he reached the top and stabilized himself, he threw the rope down and then Arthur repeated the same set of steps and got to the top. Then it was Jason's turn. So he got on his stomach to pull himself up, but the water was much deeper and colder than before. It smashed into his face as he tried to force his way through it. God, this is cold, Jason thought to himself. Eventually, he managed to emerge through the opening into the small passage. Jason felt confused as the tunnel splits into two. Not only that, he couldn't see the two fellow cavers ahead of him. He felt anxious just to wait there at the top because there was barely any room even for one person to stand there at a time. After a few more seconds, he decided to go back down and ask Andrew. But first, Jason tried slowly crab walking his way 15 more feet to check on his friends ahead when the streaming water just rapidly sweeps him onto his back, completely submerging him. It all happened so fast within a matter of seconds. He felt the pressure of water building up more and more so fast. He knew if he didn't get out of the crawl right now, the surge of water would easily pop him out like a champagne cork over Double Trouble and onto all the rocks below. He tried to move, but he could not. His boot was stuck between two rock shelves. Lying on his back with an overwhelming amount of water rushing over him, he couldn't even call out for help. He's gasping for air frantically. This went on for about 5 minutes, and to Jason it felt like hours. He thought of his family, his kids, his wife, and all the memories he has with them. He remembered what his wife Caroline said to him the other night, to be more careful, and this is exactly what she warned about. But luckily, that is when Zack came to the scene. He's also at the top of Double Trouble now, and when he looked into the bastard's crawl, he heard Jason yelling out. It was a cry, like a primal kind of fear. However, he spotted Jason right away. Then he quickly shouts down to Andrew, "Jason's in trouble." Immediately, Andrew clambers up behind Zack and rushed into Bastard's crawl. He knew the seriousness of the situation and that Jason must have gone into a state of shock due to cold water. He yelled to Jason, "Head up, Jase." He almost couldn't see Jason's face through all that water. Andrew wasn't close enough yet. Jason was a few feet away from him, but he was in a precarious position, stuck in a tight space. Andrew couldn't pull him out right away. "Keep on coming, dude. Toward me. Head up." Jason couldn't even hear Andrew at this point. "Place your feet against me, lift your butt up, and float. Come on, Jase." Somehow, maybe, Jason heard Andrew, or maybe he just finally found enough strength to get up. Either way, finally, his gloved hands emerged from the water and then his wet face. He was gasping for air, and the second his vision became clear, he saw Andrew. He said his legs are still cold and therefore he can't move. When Jason said that, he didn't even recognize his own voice as it came out so slurred and slow as if he just suffered a stroke. Nonetheless, he tried to free his boot, but it won't budge. "It's okay, dude," Andrew said, and reached into the rushing water. He fished around for the stuck boot, and when he got a hold of something that felt like a boot, Jason confirmed, "Yeah, that's my boot." That's when Andrew realized that the boot were in a jam. He told Jason to calm down, and with both of their strength combined, they can easily dislodge the boot. Since then, about 20 minutes went by, and Jason and Andrew both eventually emerged from the bastard's crawl. Jason was wet and gasping. Andrew helped him settle on a narrow ledge inches above the water. After about a minute, Jason kinda came back to reality. His eyes wide open, looking baffled. He realized he almost died. "Hey man, you okay?" Andrew asked Jason, grasping his shoulders. "Zach, stay with Jason while I get the supply bags up ahead." So after about 15 minutes, when Andrew returned, he came with some bad news. He told Zach the water is rising. So he told Zach to go and catch up to Matt and Arthur, who must probably only be about 100 meters or so ahead, while he stay with Jason to help him warm up for a bit. He said the second Jason is stable and back in the game, they both will come and join them. However, he also said in case if they did not return in 30 minutes or so, notify search and rescue. Andrew appeared calm and collected, but deep down he was worried that Jason might suffer from hypothermia. It was so cold that Jason even has stopped shivering. So when Zach left, Andrew was quick to take actions. He wrapped Jason in the Mylar blanket and fired up the jet boil. He then poured hot water down Jason's clothes to warm him up. It was very effective. Jason's color began returning to normal. He also started to look more alive. "Welcome back, my friend," Andrew said. "By the way, how are you feeling? Are you feeling any ready to get out of here?" Jason said, "Yeah, I'm actually alright, and let's go." So they began. But still they had about an hour of hiking and climbing to do to get to the cave's entrance. So they started making their way, pushing through streams of water. The water is also crushing and pushing them back. It took them so much strength just to stay in one place there against the current. It was so hazardous, but despite all the roadblocks, they neared the end of one section of the crawl they had been in for a while. However, it was just one section. They still have to go through many more sections and passages, but yet they didn't fully realize how deadly their situation has gotten. This whole time the water level has been rising inch by inch. In fact, by this point, there are barely 3 to 4 inches of air left between the water and the ceiling. Certainly not enough for them to keep their heads up to breathe. The water level is way too high. Andrew calls, "Hurry, let's turn back." That's when Jason spotted a ledge several meters ahead. That section of the passage they were in was pretty high, and that ledge was above the water level. Although it was at an awkward angle, they couldn't complain considering their circumstances. It had enough room for both of them. So the two clambered up to it. Andrew perched in front of Jason so that the brunt of the spray from the water will not hit Jason. Although this ledge was many inches above the water level, they knew it was only a matter of time until the water actually reaches them, especially considering how fast the water is filling the cave by this point. To make matters worse, the sheer force of the water flow has now caused a wind inside the cave. Now, if you didn't know, caves actually have their own microclimates, and having nowhere to go, the wind keens and whistles. It is about 6 p.m. now, and the two friends are still about 200 feet underground. Since Zach left, it has been about 3 hours. The cold is getting unbearable now. Their jet boil is out of fuel, so nowhere to stay warm as well. Thus, the two huddled together under the blanket they had. "If we don't get out of here, our wives will kill us." Jason, who's shivering, said that. Since they cannot lose the only light they had, they decided to sit in complete darkness to conserve the headlamp batteries. From time to time they checked the water level, and each time it had risen a bit more than the last time. Jason tried pulling his sweatshirt all the way up to his nose. He just couldn't think of anything else to do to cope with the cold. Technically, they are trapped here. Whatever route they go down, they are bound to come across danger. Whatever they try to do next could end up being the last thing they ever do. But waiting also meant nothing better but getting drowned. They are just simply waiting to die at this point. They just couldn't believe the nightmare they were in. The water level wasn't getting any lower. However, by now, Jason was thinking beyond all that. He was thinking about his family and what would happen to them after his death. He was like, okay, so once I'm dead, how much life insurance coverage do I have? On the other hand, Andrew, who was also the most rational and calm one in the group, was even more silent now. In other words, they are feeling completely hopeless here. There was also no sign of rescuers. The two were thinking, what even happened to the other three? Did they make it out? Or are they also trapped like us, blocked by water on the other side of the bastard scroll? Or maybe they could even be dead. Jason and Andrew were presuming the worst. However, what they didn't know was that their three friends actually made it out. And not only that, they also alerted the authorities. By 9 p.m., many teams of search and rescue arrived on the scene and now they are on their way to save them. Nonetheless, it was easier said than done. Due to the rising water level and ferocity, the rescue teams had to retreat to the cave mouth and prepare themselves once again better to try again in some time. Due to that, a few more hours passed with no sign of help. And Jason and Andrew had no idea that people are even trying to rescue them. They didn't even move a muscle by this point for the fear of sleeping. Due to complete exhaustion and cold, both men dozed off from time to time, but within seconds they jerked themselves awake. Every 20 to 30 minutes they checked on each other. However, deep down both knew that they are just waiting to die. So this nightmare went on like this for hours and hours. It was about 5 a.m. by that point. "You still with me?" Andrew asked. "Yup." "You still good?" "Yup." And one time they turned on their headlamps to scan the water. It seemed to be receding, something they really did not expect. Some good news after hours. So after all, they might make it. "Let's wait a bit and see," Andrew said. About another hour passed and now the water level has gone down quite a bit even more. At least enough that if they were to jump into water from the ledge, their heads would be above the water to breathe even in narrower passages. They actually have a chance to escape now. By this point they had been in the same position sitting on the ledge for 12 hours and they didn't even know that. Their bodies were stiff and they could barely move, but slowly they had to unfold their bodies. Jason screamed trying to move. Apparently a muscle in his groin got strained, but he didn't even get phased by it and kept trying. It seems that due to the little glimpse of hope they have been given here by decreasing water levels, they have gotten their spirits back and now are ready to do whatever it takes to get out. They jumped into the water and slowly moved forward. To get through the bastard scroll fully, they got on all fours and kept moving. They were so determined that nothing else mattered. They just wanted to survive, but still, each time Jason moved his leg, he cried out. It was that painful. Andrew on the other hand was encouraging Jason, "You can do this, we are almost there." Then, finally, just like that, they were out of the crawl. But still, they are not out of the woods. Now it is getting even longer for them to slowly move through the water. So they still have 1.5 hours of hiking and climbing to do in order to reach the cave entrance. With that realization, they made their way slowly and carefully toward the cave mouth. From section to section, the water level was different, but luckily none had enough water to go above their heads. But now they are in a passage that is high enough that they can walk upright. So they walked for a while through this tunnel until Jason saw something. Something flicker in the distance. It is a light. No, it is more than one. I'm seeing lights. Jason plows ahead and soon he also hears voices. "Andrew? Jason? It's one of the rescuers." Yup, a whole team of rescuers it was. So for the first time in many long and dark hours since being trapped and almost dying, Jason felt happy knowing he's alive and gets to see his family. So did Andrew. In fact, Jason's emotions kinda got to him and a few tears trickled down his cheeks. "We made it," the two friends said to each other. After all, the nightmare did not end in a tragedy. Alright guys, we have got to the end of this story. I hope you guys enjoyed this or even learned something from their story. I will see you guys soon with another story, and until then, stay safe out there and goodbye.